What if I told you that Harry and Meghan's entire relationship dynamic wasn't just about love, but about power? That from the very beginning, Harry was already primed to seek Meghan's approval, and she knew exactly how to position herself as the one in control. This moment that happened in Nottingham Cottage, according to Harry in Spare, tells us everything we need to know. The way Meghan reacts, the way Harry scrambles to explain. This is a pattern that repeats itself over and over again. So, what's really happening here? Let's break it down. But before we begin, here's the intro. Welcome to Revealing the Narc. Join me as I highlight narcissistic traits in celebrities and public figures. Everything here is in my opinion and not professional advice. If you enjoy the analysis, please like and subscribe. Let's take a step back. Picture this. Prince Harry, a literal prince, is bringing Meghan to his home for the first time. This should be an exciting moment, right? Except he's already bracing himself for her reaction. Here's an excerpt from his book. It begins. I was excited to welcome Meg to my home, but also embarrassed. Not Caught was not a palace. Not Caught was palace adjacent. That was the best you could say for it. End of passage. So, right off the bat, Harry is setting the stage. He's nervous. He's almost apologizing for his home before Meghan has even reacted. That's already a sign of a deeper issue. He's not thinking, this is my home and I love it. He's thinking, what will Meghan think? And that tells us everything. Before Meghan even says a word, Harry is already anticipating her judgment. He's not describing his home with pride, nor is he seeing it through his own eyes. He's seeing it through hers. This shift in perspective is crucial because it shows three different things. The first is Harry places Meghan's perception above his own. The second is he's seeking emotional validation, not expressing confidence. And the third is he's primed to appease and not assert himself. This tells us that his default position in this relationship is one of seeking approval, which suggests that there's an imbalance in power and self worth. When someone downplays or apologizes for themselves before being criticized, it's often a learned behavior. It suggests in this case for Harry that he may have always felt like he had to prove his worth, maybe from childhood or from past romantic relationships or both. He also assumes that Meghan will judge his space as inadequate. Why is that? Because it's likely happened before, potentially, whether from society, the press, or personal experiences. It also shows that he's uncomfortable in his own skin or in his own home in front of her. That alone is a red flag in a healthy relationship. Instead of owning his space and welcoming her in with confidence, Harry is emotionally shrinking before she even reacts. This tells us he was already conditioned to please her. And in my opinion, this happened before they even met. I did a video about it previously about their very first date and how anxious Harry was to meet her and everything that went along with it. And I think by that point, Harry was already there to condition to please Meghan. This passage that we just read, in some way, shows that he has a sense of self that's shifting to match Meghan's standard. So consider the contrast. Before Meghan, he lived in Notcott, a perfectly functional historic home. It didn't seem to bother him before. And now that he's met Meghan, suddenly he's seeing it as inadequate. He never even noticed the shabby furniture, and that's a passage we'll get to in a little bit, until she reacted to it. This shows that Meghan's standards are now his standards, even if they weren't before. This is a key trait in relationships where one partner is subtly dominant. The other partner begins to internalize their perspective as reality. And I'm going to have you rewind back to this one incident or happening event that happened just a couple of years ago. I think Harry truly does want privacy. I don't think Harry wanted a Montecito mansion. I think he would have been very happy to have a nice home in Africa and just live there and have a quiet life. And I believe there was a time that Harry did mention this, that maybe he and Meghan could move to somewhere in Africa. If anyone remembers where that is, please drop that in the comments. But it seems that this is another thing that's being rewritten by Meghan. His sense of self is shifting to match Meghan's standards. We also see that the dynamic of power is clear. Meghan is the evaluator and Harry is the performer. Meghan doesn't need to say anything negative outright. Her mere presence is enough to put Harry into defensive mode. This is incredibly revealing. Meghan holds the power in this moment. Harry is trying to prove himself worthy. Approval is not mutual. Harry is the one who needs to measure up. When a relationship is equal, both partners bring their own confidence to the table. Harry, however, is shaping his identity around Meghan's preferences instead of standing in his own. I think that this moment at Notcott is not just about a house, it's actually a microcosm of the relationship dynamic. Meghan sets the standard, Harry scrambles to meet it, his self perception adjusts to fit her expectations, and she doesn't need to say much. Her approval or disapproval is enough. This pattern is seen throughout their relationship, from their public statements to how Meghan redefined Harry's role and purpose after they left the royal family. So, what are some ways that you may have experienced this? In romantic relationships, you might feel that you're always trying to measure up. Imagine you're dating someone who subtly makes you feel like you're not good enough, but they never say it outright. Here's the first example: a polite insult about your home. You invite your new partner over to your apartment for the first time. Instead of just enjoying the time together, you find yourself cleaning like crazy, worrying about how they'll judge your space. They arrive and smile, but once inside, they make a small comment like, "Oh, wow, this is cozy. It reminds me of my freshman dorm." Now you feel embarrassed about something you never even thought was an issue before. Suddenly, you feel your place isn't good enough and you start feeling the need to impress them. Here's a second example: you're going out on a date and your partner glances at your outfit and says, "Oh, are you wearing that? I mean, it's cute, but I just imagined you'd wear something a little more dot, dot, dot." Now, even though they didn't directly insult you, you start second guessing yourself. You feel self conscious. You even consider changing your outfit to make them happier, even though you liked it before. Instead of standing in your own confidence, you're adapting to their standards, even if they never made an explicit demand. This is exactly what Harry does in Spare. He sees his home through Meghan's eyes and suddenly feels ashamed of something that was fine before. How could this look in a professional relationship? Have you ever had a boss or coworker who made you feel like you constantly had to prove yourself without them ever saying it outright? Here's the first example. You finish a big project at work, and instead of celebrating your accomplishment, your boss glances at it and says something like, "This is good, but I was expecting something a little more polished." Now, instead of being proud of your work, you start doubting your skills and overcompensating to win their approval. Here's a second example. A coworker looks at your desk and casually says, "Oh, you're still using that old laptop? I upgraded last year. It's so much faster." You hadn't even thought about needing a new one, but now you feel behind, outdated, and maybe even inadequate. The common pattern here is, instead of being comfortable and confident in your own abilities and choices, you start seeking approval from someone who never had to ask for it in the first place. Just like Harry suddenly notices what his home is like because of Meghan, you suddenly feel like your work or tools aren't good enough, even though you never had an issue with them before. How could this look in a friendship? Some friends have a way of making you feel less without being outright mean. Here's the first example. You tell your friend you're super excited about a new restaurant you just tried, and instead of sharing your excitement, they say, "Oh, you like that place? That's cute. I used to go there before I found this amazing new spot. You'd love it. It's just a little more sophisticated." And suddenly you feel small, like your choice wasn't good enough. And next time, you'll hesitate to share your excitement with them. Or maybe you save up and finally buy a new phone, something you're proud of. But when you show it to your friend, they just shrug and say, "Oh, I got that one last year. The new model is coming out soon. Are you sure you don't want to wait?" Now, instead of feeling excited about your new phone, you feel outdated, behind, and like you should have done better. Instead of being happy with your choices, you start evaluating yourself through their judgment. They don't have to say you made a bad decision outright, they just make you feel like you could have done better. This is exactly what happens when Megan reacts to Not Caught. Harry suddenly sees his space through her eyes and feels inadequate. How could this look in a family? Sometimes family members are the worst offenders. They set impossible expectations and make you feel like you always need to do more to be good enough. For example, you tell your mom you're taking a break from work because you're feeling burnt out. Instead of support, she sighs and says, "Well, I guess if that's what makes you happy, I just always thought you'd push yourself a little harder." Now, instead of feeling relief, you feel guilt, like you should be working harder, even though you know you need the rest. Or you excitedly tell your dad about a new job offer, and he nods, then immediately says, "Oh, that's great. Did you hear that your brother got promoted again? He's really moving up." Instead of celebrating your achievement, you feel compared, diminished, and like you have to do more to get praise. Your own accomplishments and choices don't feel good enough because you've been conditioned to compare yourself to someone else's standard. Just like Harry suddenly felt his home wasn't good enough, you may feel like your decisions aren't valid unless someone else approves them. So, how can you recognize this pattern and break free? If you've ever felt the need to explain or justify yourself the way Harry did, that's a sign of a power imbalance in the relationship. If you've changed how you see yourself because of someone else's reaction, you've absorbed their judgment as your reality. The key to breaking free is recognizing that your value is not based on someone else's approval or silent disapproval. If any of this resonated with you and you feel comfortable sharing, please drop in the comments and let's have a discussion about it. Let's continue reading. The next passage begins. "I watched her as she walked up the front path through the white picket fence. To my relief, she made no sign of dismay, gave no indication of disillusionment until she got inside. Then she said something about a frat house, and the passage ends here." Oof, you guys see all of that? First of all, it's literally a white picket fence on Kensington Palace grounds. And I mean, many of us would love these types of accommodations. But, anyways, let's continue. So, what I just read is important because she doesn't react outside the house only once she's inside. Now, there could be many reasons why that we can speculate. The most obvious is maybe it didn't look so cozy and homely on the outside. But let's assume that Megan immediately didn't like it as soon as she walked up. A narcissist or someone with controlling tendencies knows how to perform. She's polite when she needs to be, but once she's comfortable, the mask slips and the judgment comes out. Megan is always aware of how she presents herself to others. If there was anyone around, staff, neighbors, security, she wouldn't want to be seen reacting negatively. If she made a comment outside, there's always a chance someone overhears, a security camera catches it, or Harry's staff notices. Megan is known for shifting between different personas depending on her audience. Outside, she tries to seem that she's this sweet, easygoing girlfriend. Inside, where it's just Harry, her real opinions come out. The moment you enter someone's home, there's a psychological shift. It's their space and their safe zone. But by withholding her reaction until she was inside, Megan subtly takes control. Inside the house, she is now the judge. It immediately shifts the energy. Harry starts explaining himself, scrambling to justify. It places her in a position of higher status. This space is below my standards, she might be thinking, and now Harry is aware of it. A narcissistic or controlling person doesn't always need to make demands outright. They just need to see how their partner reacts to disapproval. By waiting until they're inside, Megan gets to observe. Will Harry get defensive? Will he immediately try to justify the mess, which he did? Will he feel embarrassed and start self correcting? Yes, he did. If Harry had laughed it off and said, "Yeah, it's not fancy, but I love it," that's a sign of self confidence. Instead, he immediately starts justifying, apologizing, and downplaying his space. That tells Megan he's already seeking her approval. And this is a dynamic that benefits her long term. So, this moment wasn't just an offhand comment. It was a subtle psychological play that made Harry question himself. It shifted the power dynamic and it set the tone for the entire relationship moving forward. Let's talk about a couple of ways that you may have experienced this, and let's start with romantic relationships. Let's say you start dating someone new, and in the beginning, they seem accepting of everything about you, your style, your hobbies, your apartment. But then over time, things change. They could say, "I mean, your place is cute, but have you ever thought about upgrading to something nicer? Your car is fine, but wouldn't you rather have something more reliable?" Now, you're suddenly self conscious about the things you didn't question before. They didn't say anything at first, but once they felt secure in the relationship, the criticism started. Or when you were just dating someone, everything was fine. But after you move in together, your partner starts making passive aggressive comments about your furniture, your cooking, and your habits. "Oh, this is how you fold your laundry? That's interesting. I mean, this setup works for now, but we should definitely upgrade soon." So now you start feeling like you're being evaluated in your own home. They didn't criticize you before, but now that they're inside your space, they're setting new expectations. There's a pattern here. They were polite at first, but once they got closer to you, physically or emotionally, the judgment started. How about in a friendship? When you first meet a new friend, they seem to love your personality, your interests, your sense of fashion, but over time, their tone changes. They could say things like, "I mean, that outfit is cute for your vibe. I could never wear that, but whatever works for you. I love that you don't care what people think. I wish I could just throw on anything too." So, what's happened here? What used to feel like a compliment suddenly feels backhanded. They didn't say anything negative at first, but once they felt secure in their friendship, these micro criticisms started. Let's say you invite this friend over and they're so excited to see your place, but they step inside and say, "Oh, it's smaller than I expected, but it's cozy. I love how you don't stress about having the latest decor trends." You start feeling defensive about your own space, even though they never actually said anything was wrong with it. The pattern here is they didn't show disapproval right away, but once they knew you better, the judgment slipped in. And how about in a family? You could have a parent who acts supportive in public but criticizes you in private. In front of others, they praise you, they talk about how proud they are of you, but behind closed doors, the tone changes. They say, "I mean, I told everyone you got a promotion, but I hope you're actually working hard." Or, "You're doing well, but you still have a long way to go before you're really successful." So you start feeling like their approval was just a performance when it was done publicly. The real opinion only comes when no one else is around. Or perhaps you have a sibling who, in quotation marks, supports you until they have the upper hand. Let's say you finally achieve something big, and at first your sibling congratulates you. But later, when it's just the two of you, they say, "I mean, that's great, but honestly, I always thought you'd end up doing something better." Yeah, that's a big step for you. I guess we all have different levels of success. What happens here? Your win doesn't feel like a win anymore because they made you feel small in private while being supportive in public. They wait until no one else is around to make you feel less than. So I'm going to ask all of you, have you ever noticed someone being completely polite and supportive at first, only to shift into passive aggressive critiques once they felt comfortable? If you did, this is a control tactic. It makes the other person feel like they need to prove themselves or earn back the approval they originally had. If you feel comfortable sharing, please go ahead and drop this experience in the comments. Going back to the passage from Harry's biography or autobiography spare, the there's a choice of words that Megan uses to describe Harry's home. She calls it a frat house. What does that imply? I'm going to stop for a second and let you all think about it. What does that imply? To me, it implies immaturity, chaos, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a frat house. I'm just saying at this point, college is probably over. Megan is in her mid 30s, and she probably looks down on a frat house. So that's why this comment is so, um, how should I say? It's not a direct insult, but it's dismissive and it's meant to lower Harry's self worth. And what does he do? The passage continues and says, "She wasn't far off. Just a place to keep my stuff," I explained, moving around some papers and clothes. "I'm not here much," I said. And the passage ends there. Boom. That's all it takes. Megan makes one dismissive remark, and Harry instantly starts explaining himself, almost apologizing for existing in the space he lives in. This is a classic example of someone feeling the need to prove their worth to a partner who is subtly making them feel less than. Megan didn't yell, insult, or outright shame Harry. She simply made a dismissive comment comparing his home to a frat house. At face value, that might not seem like a big deal, but why does it hit so hard? It's indirect and it makes it harder to challenge. It plants doubt in his mind. He might be thinking, is my space really beneath her? And it forces him to defend himself and seek her approval. This type of passive judgment is more effective than outright criticism because it feels like an observation rather than an attack, making it easier for the recipient to accept rather than resist. It creates an imbalance. The person receiving the comment now feels he has to justify himself instead of being comfortable in his own home. And it subtly shifts the dynamic. Harry now feels inferior, and Megan positions herself as the one with better taste, higher standards, and more authority. The fact that Harry immediately starts explaining himself can tell us a little bit about his motivations. He has a fear of rejection. On a deep level, people who are seeking approval in relationships will do whatever it takes to maintain their partner's interest. If Megan disapproves of his space, that could extend to her disapproving of him. So he immediately tries to justify and fix it. If Harry has a history of feeling like he has to prove his worth, whether due to his upbringing, past relationship, or his royal status, he might already be primed to seek external validation rather than trusting his own instincts. So, how could this look in your life? Let's talk about romantic relationship first. Let's say you have a partner who compliments you on your appearance, but then adds something like, "You look amazing. I mean, if you just toned up a little, you'd be unstoppable." Now, instead of feeling good, you feel like you need to prove that you can be even better. Or let's say you're excited about a hobby. Maybe you love reading romance novels or playing video games, and your partner says, "Oh, that's cute. I mean, I guess if it makes you happy." It's not a direct insult, but suddenly you feel self conscious about it. Should you be doing something more mature or serious? I actually have a direct example of this. If you're interested to know what this example is, drop it in the comments. And this is going to be something different. Drop it in the comments that you would be interested to know about this second example I provided you. And I'll create a short about it and share it with all of you and explain what happened in my own situation. Let's go on to a third example. You finally buy something you love, a car, a piece of furniture, or maybe even an outfit. But instead of being happy for you, your partner says, "Oh, that's interesting. I probably would have gone with something a little more high end. But if you like it, that's all that matters." Now you start second guessing your own decision and you feel the need to explain why you made that choice. The pattern in all three of these examples is that the partner doesn't demand a change. They simply make you feel like you could be better, and suddenly you're seeking their approval instead of feeling confident. How about in the workplace? Let's say you turn in a project you're proud of, and instead of praising you, your boss glances at it and says, "Oh, that's an interesting approach. I mean, if that's how you want to do it, sure." Now you start second guessing your work and you feel the need to explain your choices rather than own them. Or you could be suggesting an idea in a meeting, and instead of engaging, a coworker says, "Oh, well, that's a take. I guess that works if you're going for something really basic." They didn't outright call your idea bad, but suddenly you feel small, inexperienced, and like you need to justify your point. The pattern here is that you now feel the need to prove yourself rather than standing confidently in your skills. Let's talk about how this could look in a friendship. Let's say you wear an outfit you love, and your friend says, "Oh my gosh, you're so brave for wearing that. I could never pull it off." So now you start feeling self conscious instead of stylish. Or let's say you land a big opportunity, a job, a promotion, or a new business deal. Instead of being happy for you, your friend says, "That's so good for you. I mean, it's not exactly what I'd go for, but I love that you're happy." So now your win doesn't really feel like a win anymore. The pattern here is that they never directly criticize you, but they make you feel like you could be doing better, and suddenly you're seeking their approval. The key takeaway here is that you're recognizing that you need to prove yourself. It's a trap. If you've ever felt the need to explain yourself when you didn't have to, you might be in a dynamic where someone is suddenly making you feel less than. Instead of saying, "That's just how I like it," you justify your choice. Instead of owning your success, you try to prove why it matters. Instead of feeling confident, you seek reassurance. This is a red flag. The moment someone makes you feel like you need to prove your worth, they have power over you. And that's exactly what happened to Harry in this moment. Okay, so now up until this point, we can see that the power dynamic has been established between Harry and Meghan. Meghan is the evaluator, the one whose approval matters. Harry is the one seeking that approval, and that's dangerous in any relationship because once that imbalance exists, it only grows with time. Let's continue in the book. The passage begins. "I'd never noticed until then just how shabby the furniture was. Brown sofa, browner beanbag." Meg paused before the beanbag. I know, I said. The passage ends there. Even Harry's thoughts now have shifted. We were saying before Megan, he didn't seem to mind his place. And now all of a sudden he's noticing that his furniture is shabby. He is seeing it through her eyes and he feels ashamed. This is what happens when someone enters a relationship with a person who always subtly makes them feel like they could be doing better. You start questioning everything about yourself. When one person in a relationship becomes the evaluator and the other person becomes the one seeking approval, the relationship stops being equal and starts becoming a power struggle where one person dictates the other's self worth. Approval becomes currency. The person seeking approval will start changing their behavior, thoughts, and even their identity just to keep the other person satisfied. The power gap widens over time. At first, it's a small comment about a beanbag. Later, it becomes about who makes decisions, who has the final say, who controls the emotional tone of the relationship. It trains the, in quotation marks, the weaker person, the one that's seeking approval, to second guess themselves. Harry now questions his own reality. If he suddenly feels ashamed of something he was fine with before, what else would he start questioning? This is where control begins, not through screaming or through demands, but through these subtle shifts in perception. I want to remind all of you too that this is the first time that Megan is going to her home to his home. So this is very, very early on in their relationship, and Harry is already having these types of thought processes. So let's talk about some examples that you may have experienced. You might have had a partner who makes you feel cheap. You were perfectly happy with your wardrobe until your partner said, "Wow, you still wear that brand? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you should treat yourself to something more high end." Now you start questioning your fashion choices, even though you never had a problem with them before. Actually, this just triggered a thought in me. In Spare, Harry does mention that before Megan, he didn't really care what he looked like, and he would go shopping at, in America, we call it TJ Maxx, but I think in the UK it might be called TK Maxx. And he would go towards the end of the day so he wouldn't be spotted, and he would shop in the clearance section. And I don't remember exactly, but I feel like his perception of that changed. So this is something that perhaps Harry did actually go through with Meghan. Let's talk about a second example. You have a partner who shames your home. You invite them to your apartment and you thought it was a cozy, happy place. But the moment they step inside, they say, "Oh, this is minimalistic." Suddenly, and of course, it has to do with the tone that they say it, right? Because someone could mean that as a compliment. But that's the thing with dealing with these types of people. Sometimes what they're saying, the words may seem nice or kind, but it's the tone and the body language. So when you try to explain it to someone who wasn't there, they may not understand how um, insulting or how devastating the feelings may have been after they said something to you. So, in this example, you may start feeling embarrassed of your own home, even though you were fine with it before. The pattern between these two examples is they didn't demand you change anything, they just make you feel like you should. Another example of this could be the parent who compares you to others. You probably tell your parents about your new job, and instead of celebrating, they say, "Oh, that's great. Did you hear your cousin just got promoted again?" Now you feel like your achievement isn't enough, even though you were proud of it before. The parent isn't saying that you failed, they just make you feel like you should have done better. So let's just summarize. Why is Harry's thought process in this book or in this section of the book a red flag? He does, in quotation marks, "I'd never noticed until then just how shabby the furniture was," end quotation marks. Before Megan, like we were saying earlier, I think he thought his home was fine. He may not have even thought about it. But after Megan, he sees it as shabby. This is psychological conditioning. The fact that Megan never directly told him to feel bad, but he instinctively starts seeing himself through her lens is a huge warning sign in relationships. So, why does this little story matter? Because it's not just about a cottage, it's about how power is established in a relationship. It's about how people with controlling tendencies make their partners feel smaller, even without raising their voice. And it's about how Harry, from the very beginning, was already falling into the pattern of trying to prove himself to Megan instead of standing confidently in who he is. Now, I want to hear from all of you. Do you think Megan was subtly manipulating Harry from the start? And if you feel comfortable and you've been in this situation before, and I hope you haven't, where a partner made you feel like you weren't enough, feel free, if you're comfortable, to share that in the comments and let's discuss. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, hit that notification bell so you'll know every time I drop a new video. And yeah, I want to thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate you all so much. I hope you have a beautiful day and I will talk to you all soon. Bye, everyone.